feel free to come back and watch it more. And follow us on salemsafe.org, Facebook, and Twitter. And with that, I would like to go ahead and introduce Mayor Kim Driscoll, and also recognize, I'm not sure if they're here yet, but I know we have several elected officials that we're also planning to attend: Representative Paul Tucker, Senator Joan Lovely, City Council President Patty Marcello, and City Councilor Bob McCarthy from Salem. So with that, I'm pleased to introduce Salem Mayor Kim Driscoll, the elected leader who has ushered in a new cleaner energy era in Salem and as an environmental justice and gateway and green community. Salem once was known to environmental advocates throughout this region as, its polluting coal-fired power plant was the primary focus. And now we're really poised today to move into a new era of clean, renewable energy, in no small part due to the strategic efforts of Mayor Driscoll. She's a great mayor. I'll make a terrific lieutenant governor. She knows that the actions speak louder than words. So I'm pleased to turn over the program to Mayor Driscoll, who will introduce Salem's next steps to offshore wind.
Thank you, Cindy. So great to be with all of you. And, I think SAFE has been such a key partner in all of this work. So really want to recognize you, Pat, the entire SAFE team for the work you've done to be strong advocates and help us get to this amazing place that we are. My key job tonight is to introduce your next speaker, who will be talking to us about this project that's on the horizon. Bill White, who is the head of U.S. offshore wind for Avangrid Renewables, is a key principal, along with folks at Crowley, in bringing this vision and making it a reality. In his role, Bill is responsible for the overall management of approximately 5 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity, and that's through Avangrid Renewables. Much of that is coming from a partnership with Vineyard Wind. Prior to Avangrid Renewables, Bill was the managing director for ENBW North America, but we really got to know Bill when he was a key leader at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, the CEC. For 10 years there, he helped develop the Massachusetts offshore wind market. And that was before offshore wind was as popular as it is right now. He led the state's efforts on federal leasing for offshore wind development, as well as transmission planning, environmental surveys, supply chain, workforce, all the logistics and pieces that need to come together, including stakeholder engagement. Additionally, he was responsible for the construction of the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal, so he knows a little bit about those early efforts to really make Massachusetts an offshore wind leader. He understands that industry growth will be driven by both markets and policies, while also understanding that technical characteristics of offshore wind transmission infrastructure. It's hard to find somebody who understands the policy piece, the technical piece, who's been on the ground on the front lines, actually building out terminals to support this use. Teamed up with Crowley, Crowley, who's one of the largest port operation companies in the United States. We really do have a dream team of talent, experience, and know-how on the Salem Harbor offshore wind project. It's a true public-private partnership that will require us to have public investment from state and federal partners, as well as private investments. We're at the forefront of this work. Not surprising to those of you who know Salem's history. We've always had our prominence tied to the sea. This is yet another example of it. It's just an incredible opportunity for our city, our Commonwealth, and our planet. There's lots of engineering, permitting, design, construction, logistics ahead. But right now, we're really excited about seeing all of that through to the fruition and the amazing opportunity this means for our community and our region. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bill White.
All right, Mayor Driscoll, thank you very much. I know you've got an intense schedule, and so recognize that you might have to jump, but just wanted to thank you for hosting us the other day. Some of you may have seen the news where all the power of Massachusetts at the mayor's request, as well as Senator Lovely and Rep. Tucker, came up to Salem. We got a chance to have the Speaker and the Senate President, the 2 key energy chairs from the legislature, and really kind of lean in a little bit, shall we say, and really kind of talk to them. And, the mayor kind of led that with the legislators, and we got a chance to walk the site with them, and, seeing is believing. And I think, I think it was really an important step. And so I thank you guys for doing that, including us, and giving us an opportunity to kind of lean in a little bit, because, we have been, as the mayor said, many of us have been talking about offshore wind for, almost 12 plus years. Some of us kind of in the wilderness thinking that like this was never going to happen. I remember when that September day when I came up and saw Pat and Cindy at the event where we launched and announced this thing. It was really one of the more exciting days of my career because it was the first time, to be in a community that got it and that saw it, that didn't have any hesitation, obviously had long history with fossil fuel, but was ready to go. So we are really thrilled. I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into who we are, because for some of you, many of us in the offshore industry, you might say, who are all these people and who are all these companies? And we'll try to give you a little explanation, give you a snapshot of us. But then I'm going to turn it over a bit. I'm going to turn it over a bit to Jay Borkland, your next door neighbor there up in Swampscott, but really is the country's leading thinker and planner and expert on offshore wind ports. I've known Jay for almost 15 years because we both oversaw the construction of the terminal. Jay was the lead engineer of the terminal in New Bedford and handled just about everything. And so when I came to Avangrid, I said, "Hey Jay, how you doing? What do you think? You want to come join us?" So I'm thrilled to have him on our team. We got Rose DeCosta here. You got Patrick is with us, both former legislative leader Pat Johnson, and then McCall is on with us too. So, all right, why don't we do that? Should we zip through a couple of slides and then I'll stay on for the presentation, and then we can engage in questions. Is that all right? Okay. So many of you, I think, are probably well versed. I see Councilor McCarthy is coming into the meeting. We got a chance to spend time with him, and I haven't met the council president yet, but I'm sure we will, or maybe we did. I can't remember. But so we are talking about really diving forward here up in Salem with really the state's second offshore wind port. We can get into the details, but maybe as an introduction to Avangrid Renewables. So, all right, you've heard of Vineyard Wind, you've heard of maybe, some of the other players in the industry, but Avangrid, who is Avangrid? So Avangrid has been one of the key players in the U.S. offshore wind industry, although we've been part of that Vineyard Wind joint venture, but we are itself, it's a 50-50 JV, but we are itself, one of the main players, and I would say the pioneers in the development of offshore wind. So who are we though, as far as beyond, I'll talk about who we are in the US, but this slide gives you a sense of who we are globally. And, I will tell you, we are one of the largest sustainable energy companies in the world, with a headquarters based in Spain. We're part of the Iberdrola group. As you can see there, they've already built 3 offshore wind projects in Europe, but a huge number of projects that are currently right now in construction. So it's a group of about 700, mostly experts and engineers that are driving this new industry forward, obviously with the base in Europe, but looking across Asia into the North American opportunity. So a huge effort, a big company, lots of experience. And for any of those who might get a little kind of worried or focused on this America First stuff, look, this is a new industry in the U.S. We need to have the expertise that Europe brings us 30 years ahead of us. Unfortunately, I wish we got in the game earlier, but we didn't. But there's this important skills transfer that we're going to see, utilizing that expertise in Europe to help us lead this U.S. offshore wind industry. Maybe I'll move quicker. Next slide. I'm getting warmed up. It's late though. So Avangrid, Avangrid is a company here in the United States. The offshore wind business is headquartered in Boston, so we're right down the street. And many of the team is local, although we've integrated a lot of the Spanish and British team members in forming a team. We're about 100 people right now here in Boston, but we're also the 3rd largest onshore wind developer in the United States. And of course, we're expanding into the solar market. So part of our business is the onshore renewables, and we're going strong on that front. But we're also a major player in offshore. So next slide. So when we think about offshore, what we're talking about is, and let me just give that context. I mentioned how we like to try to confuse everybody. one of the things that we did recently is we kind of restructured this Vineyard Wind joint venture. So the Vineyard Wind joint venture is made up of two major companies, Avangrid Renewables and Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners. Many of you have met Lars Stanley Peterson, my friend for many, many years. He leads the CIP stuff, and I lead the Avangrid Renewables stuff side, shall we say. And so for Vineyard Wind 1, that's the first amazing, beautiful project. We just broke ground last year. That 800 megawatt project is coming into Massachusetts through the Cape, and that joint venture remains intact. Okay, so we continue forward together as two companies to lead Vineyard Wind 1 into Massachusetts, and we're really excited about that project. It's 800 megawatts. We're talking about a significant impact on greenhouse gas emission reduction, equivalent of removing over 100,000 cars off the street, enormous amount of greenhouse gas emissions reductions. I think many of you guys are familiar with the story of Vineyard Wind 1. So pioneering project in the US, and we're thrilled to still be part of it and bring it to fruition. Next slide will just show you the Park City Wind project. Now this project again was originally part of the joint venture, but Avangrid Renewables just took it over a couple of months ago. So we're leading 100% of the Park City Wind project. So this is our second project. This project is going to be paid for by ratepayers of Connecticut. And we competed in a solicitation with all the other industry players and won this project in a PPA with the Connecticut utilities a couple of years ago. So we are moving that project forward too. Again, Park City Wind, with some great benefits to the state of Connecticut. But again, a project that we will deploy and construct out of this marshalling port here in the city of Salem. Next slide. This is the Commonwealth Wind bid in this project. And this was our sweet project, one of the most beautiful experiences of my life, to be a part of a team that developed this bid and this project. And as you all now know, we basically utilize the opportunity to seize upon a great partnership with the city of Salem and the mayor and her team, as well as Crowley Marine, as she mentioned, as well as CIP. So we all basically went in together, and unlike other efforts that happen around the country, we decided to put our money where our mouth is, and we made a commitment to Crowley in partnership with the city to basically be the long-term tenant and put the money up front in order to make this port a reality. We can't do it all by ourselves, but we're looking for that public-private partnership, and that's why we were so excited to be able to present to the Speaker and the Senate President, I think last week. So this is the 1,200 megawatt project we recently were awarded by the state of Massachusetts. This is a project that not only brings the second port for marshaling. This is where the turbines will be located and assembled and deployed, but and really an anchor for jobs. I'm going to let Jay get into that, but it's also a project where we brought a first manufacturing factory to Massachusetts as part of the offshore wind industry, and that's going to be a factory that will build cable down at the Brayton Point power plant, another former coal-fired power plant. So a really exciting project. We can talk about that and answer any questions as we go. Okay, next one. Is this my all right, maybe this is my last slide, and then I'm going to stop talking. But the thing that I get most excited about and almost emotional about is we've talked for a long time about this energy transition, and everyone when we think about this, we think about those jobs that were in Salem, or when Representative Haddad down in Somerset talks about the Brayton Point facility. She said, yeah, we knew it was an enormous polluter, right, and had tremendous impacts, asthma, et cetera, on health. But at the same time, it employed 300 people in my town and was a huge economic contributor to the tax base. And so that's always been the thing. Offshore wind, it's too expensive. Well, I think Avangrid has addressed that in a very significant way. Offshore wind, though, yeah, we like the clean energy benefits, but what about we'll never be able to displace these jobs. And I think with this Commonwealth Wind project, partnered with Park City, we've kind of unlocked the code. So we're going to be able to, meet those goals, meet those challenges, and really kind of be the catalyst for this new clean energy transition. So this is the artist rendition. Many of you have seen it, of what we envision to be kind of this marshalling port up there, 42 acres, public-private, Crowley we talked about, and staging for future projects. So we're going to do Commonwealth Wind there, and we're going to do also the Park City Wind project. And then once we finish using it later on this decade, Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners and Lars Peterson's team will then utilize it and give it more certainty and more jobs and more commitment. So this is, and there's some of the pictures of Pat and Cindy and others when we came up for the party in September. So with that, I might turn it over to my friend Jay Borkley.
Hello, Bill, or thank you, Bill, very much. And hello to all the members, esteemed members of the legislature, both the state and city, and the great leaders and the members of SAFE. I'm really happy to be presenting to you again. And, isn't Bill's positivity just perfectly addictive? I never get tired of working with Bill or with all the people at Avangrid that are working so hard to make offshore wind a reality here in the US. This opportunity in Salem has come our way. It is absolutely an example of an opportunity that occurs once a millennium. The sun, the moon, the stars, all the fish in the sea, and all the air molecules in this part of the globe have all aligned to point at Salem as a great opportunity for offshore wind. And we couldn't be more pleased. I personally couldn't be more pleased because I'm a local resident and I'm really excited to see this happen. We have searched the eastern coast for the kind of ports that we need in order to install and what we call marshal the offshore wind farm. You see an example of an offshore wind farm we've been involved with behind me. These are giant components that are put out in the ocean using giant vessels, and they require very specialized ports. No ports exist in the US except for the one that Bill was instrumental in making happen, and I helped design in New Bedford. Is the first port in the US that's tailor-made for offshore wind, and Salem will then be one of the next couple of ports that will be built for the offshore wind industry. So just thinking about, there's sort of two phases of work that will occur. And I should mention that our great partner, Crowley Marine, will be working on this with us. They actually would be the ones responsible for building out the infrastructure at the terminal to suit our needs. We'll be working hand in glove with them to make sure that whatever is prepared at the site will meet the needs of us and the contractors that we hire to bring the materials to the marshalling port and to put the equipment out into the ocean. This is the rendering that has been mentioned by several folks. You've seen it in the papers and in multiple presentations. It's a fairly good rendering of what it will look like when we get going. There's be the storage of components. You see some blades on the site. There'll be a couple of quaysides that will be, now when I say quayside, that's a dock, right? That's where the boats can pull up, the vessels can pull up. You'll see some giant vessels there in the background of this. Those vessels are very specialized. Just to give you an idea, those are $300 and $400 million vessels. At this point, the only vessels that meet this need are European vessels and wouldn't be able to come to this port, but there are US vessels that are being built right now in the Gulf of Mexico and other places that will service the offshore wind industry. And those are the vessels that we are anticipating we will take advantage of, and will need a port like Salem for this. During the construction aspect of the port, there's significant investment of approximately an estimate of $180 million will be invested to redevelop this port to be able to handle the heavy lift capacity and the giant cranes that will be crawling around the site. And that will translate into approximately 382, what we call FTE job years. That's a couple of years of several hundred people working at the site during the construction of the facility. And you will see a new quayside go in here, a new dock, basically, 2 docks actually is what we're planning for, and that the ground surface, it will look a bit like a parking lot. It is, my kids always say, Dad, you just build parking lots. They don't understand how specialized these ports are, but it will be able to handle the kinds of utility and that's needed for the building of an offshore wind farm. And what we like to say is this is, the biggest ballet on earth. These components need to come in and go out with precision at exact timing, and they need to be put together and in partial completion at the quayside before they go out to sea. And that's why the marshaling port is so important, and why the port in Salem is going to be a very, very important port in the offshore wind industry, and therefore an important port on the East Coast of the United States. If you can go to the next slide, please. So following the period, which will be from now until about 2025, when we're constructing the port, we will then start utilizing the port to install the offshore wind farm that we call Commonwealth Wind. It's important to remember that we are also going to be utilizing this port for the other wind project that we have called Park City Wind, which Bill mentioned and showed some images of. And so out of the port from Salem, some of the first projects that will be built in the US, over 2 gigawatts of power will be marshaled from the port in Salem. And that will make it the most productive offshore wind port in the US at that date, which is pretty incredible, because not too long ago, most of us weren't really thinking too much about Salem in terms of a port for offshore wind. And now it's really becoming central to the both this administration in Washington, the state administration, and all of us developers, central to our plans for the build out of offshore wind. There will be another about $182 million invested in the equipment and the personnel that will be utilized at the Salem facility to help marshal the offshore wind components and set them up at sea. And that will translate to another roughly 410 FTE job years over that period of about 3 to 4 years that the terminal will be used for the Park City Wind and Commonwealth Wind projects. What you see here in the foreground is another artist's rendering of these very specialized, this is called a wind turbine installation vessel, or as we like to call them, WTIVs. These are gigantic vessels. They have these jack-up legs that allow, they're called lift boats. They lift right out of the water when they are at the installation site. And I'm sure some of you have seen pictures in the media of offshore wind turbines being installed by these big lift boats. Those lift boats are the ones that will be coming into Salem Harbor, and they will be using the terminal that we have to collect the components that are ready to be installed. Next slide, please. So, one of the questions that we're often asked is, why did we pick Salem? I was part of a team that was looking at all the different options for ports to utilize for our offshore wind projects. And it became very self-apparent that Salem was going to float to the top as one of the best. And that is because the 3 kinds of vessels that are likely to be utilized for the next half century or so in offshore wind are the kind of famed WTIV, or wind turbine installation vessel, these really large jack-up vessels, feeder barges, which are barges that can take components from the port out to those large jack-up installation vessels. And eventually, sometime in the next decade, if floating wind comes along, we were looking for ports that could handle that kind of infrastructure, which is different than the fixed bottom infrastructure that we're dealing with right now, and the kind of wind farm you see behind me right now in the picture. And so we were challenged to identify what ports in the US East Coast, particularly the Northeast, within working distance of where we're going to install the wind farms, which is called the wind energy area, the New England wind energy area, to find ports that could handle all three of these kind of vessels, these three methods of installation, because we did not want to be limited by just being able to utilize one or another of these installation methods. And upon studying this, what we were able to find, or what we came to the conclusion, is that there's really only 3 ports in the Northeast that could handle this kind of all-encompassing installation methodologies. One is in Staten Island, at the southern tip of Staten Island. One is in Bridgeport, and the other is in Salem, Massachusetts. So when I say that the sun, the moon, and the stars really aligned, the fact that Salem has the attributes that are needed by the broader offshore wind industry, with a quayside, 40 or plus acres of land that's available, a deep water port access, channels that are dredged deep enough and wide enough for these large vessels, an anchoring area where the vessels that may be waiting to come into port can anchor, and close enough proximity to where the offshore wind farms will be installed. These ports are very few and very far between. And just to let everybody know that besides the 3 ports that we have shown here, moving down the coast for other wind farms that other states are looking to put in, there's only another handful of ports in the Maryland and Virginia and the Carolinas area that could even support this kind of operation for offshore wind. So Salem is in very rarefied territory, very rarefied company, and it's really being issued into a great fraternity of the offshore wind space. Next slide, please. And so, what does this mean for Salem? You may be asking, okay, we're going to have big boats and we're going to have, big tinker toys that will help us, the industry, build offshore wind farms. Well, what else does it mean? Well, what we have found through our work in Europe and in other US projects that we're working on is that the conversion of a port facility into an offshore wind facility really is a game changer for the whole port and the whole region. Lots of other businesses are attracted to the region because of the activity that's going on at the port related to the offshore wind. So you have folks that are logistics experts in transporting materials both on land and at sea. So there'll be multiple companies that will want to set up offices and move into the Salem area. There are engineering firms that will be coming along. There's lots of engineering and technical support. The development of a wind farm guarantees that it's technical enough that it guarantees that the people that work on it have to be highly trained technical folks. They're well paid. These are really excellent workers, and they're the kind of folk that start in an industry, they stay in that industry, and they put roots down and they stay in the communities. So we're really happy to be able to help usher into a new era in Salem for really the great maritime aspects, and picking up on Salem's original maritime history when the clipper ships of the world used to center on Salem. So this is a whole new genre and a whole new opportunity for a new set of strengths and capabilities that Salem can present to the world. And we fully expect that what will come with all this new activity will be universities and research institutes, training centers, and companies looking to innovate. And they will all come to Salem, and they will come up with new products and new versions of the wind turbines that we're putting out in the water now for the next generation. And Salem will be exporting their technical know-how of these experts to the rest of the world in a very short period of time here. So we're thrilled that this is the place that we have selected and worked hard. Our partner Crowley, who I'm sure you all will have a chance to meet and give a presentation like this in the future, has big plans for their operations here at the terminal. They are focused on offshore wind, but they're not necessarily restricted to offshore wind, and they will be working on the general maritime industry in the Salem area, opening offices and having lots of their own workers. And they'll be centering part of their fleet of the barges and specialized vessels that support offshore wind and all sorts of maritime commerce here out of Salem. So if I haven't gotten it across that this is a real turning point, hopefully everybody gets that. We're really excited. We seldom find friends and partners who are as enthusiastic about this as we are, and we think we have found that in Salem, and we're excited to really get going. If you could go to the next slide. One thing that we just want to show you, sort of the rarefied club that Salem becomes part of. The other ports that are being developed for offshore wind, these happen to be the other ports that we're utilizing as part of our projects. The New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal, shown on the left there in its partially constructed state, is a major offshore wind port facility that was built in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It's run by the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. It will be utilized by the Vineyard Wind 1 project, and the work will start there as we are installing offshore wind components very shortly. Bill mentioned that project will be the first one to go in the water. That project has already received all its permits, and it has its financial closure. And we are just getting ourselves in a row and everything all set to start construction on that. So that'll be very exciting to see that starting to happen. That in-water construction will be going on at the same time that we'll be constructing the port in Salem. Additionally, two other ports that we're working with in the East Coast is a staging port, we call it, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where we will stage some of the components for the Vineyard Wind 1 project called transition pieces, these yellow bits that you see there, which are also the yellow pieces that are sticking up out of the water on the turbines behind us. And then also you see the Tisbury Marine Terminal on Martha's Vineyard. That's what we call the O&M port. We will have a facility there. You see two vessels sort of with orange hulls there. Those are what we call our crew transfer vessels, or CTVs, and we'll have some offices and warehouse space there. Once the offshore wind farms are built, we have to operate them. We operate them for 25 years, pushing energy into the grid of Massachusetts, and we will be servicing that and having our operation and maintenance base out of Martha's Vineyard. It's very close to where the wind farms will be, good transit time. And that'll be become sort of a sister port to Salem in the future. And one thing I failed to mention earlier, and I meant to, is that you may ask, what does these wind farms do for our energy future? Well, obviously we all know that it's clean energy and it reduces our carbon footprint. But one 800 megawatt project, of which we're talking about 3+ here, right, can power 400,000 homes. So this is a very big step forward for the state of Massachusetts. And we're really happy that Salem is going to be part of this, and that we are going to be working with the great team in Salem to make this happen. So next slide, please. I will turn it over to our folks who are our contact on our team. This is our outreach team. These are the folks whose faces and names and business cards you will see throughout this whole process. And I'll let Rose DaCosta introduce the whole team here. Rose is on the line with us, and she can give us an idea of who the team is that you'll be interfacing with directly. And then we can, I think we'll have some questions after that. Thank you all for listening, by the way. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jay and Bill. And thank you to Pat and Cindy and all the SAFE members who invited us here today. Even though it's only been about little over 6 weeks since Massachusetts selected Commonwealth Wind, we're really excited to be here and to talk to you and to meet you and to start this conversation early about what this project means for Salem and for the whole region. And wanted to put some faces to names. Kayla is our fisheries liaison. Nikki is our workforce development and supply chain liaison, and neither of them are here tonight, but I'm sure you'll get to know them very well over the coming years. And Pat Johnson, my colleague, is also here if you want to say hi, Pat.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much, Rose. Like Rose said, can't wait to meet all of you in person. I know our friend Peg Harrington's on, who I got to meet last Friday. Hello, Peg, and look forward to meeting you all in Salem in the coming months. Thanks, Rose.
And before we turn it back over to Cindy to get to some of the questions that you've added to the chat, I just wanted to say, this is a lengthy process to redevelop a new port for offshore wind and to permit an offshore wind project. And we're in those early stages. And again, just delighted to open the lines of communication with yourselves and residents in Salem so we can minimize the impacts to residents as much as we can. I know that, construction projects can be intimidating, and we want to be good neighbors. So with that, let's get to the questions, and we'll answer as many as we can, even though it's so early in project development.
Great. Well, thank you so much for giving us all of that information. And I will maybe start to get to the questions here. We had several questions from several folks, and I think everybody can see them in the chat if they want as well, but I'll try to hit the ones that have come in so far. One of the questions was the picture with the two ports in it. What is there now, and is it water or is it land? And so certainly most of it is land, but I don't know if there is any fill areas that are planned, if somebody could answer that question. And then another question similarly was asking, is the whole area going to be paved as it is represented in the picture?
All right, Jay.
So yeah, so let me handle the second part of that. All of these offshore wind ports, and as Bill mentioned, Europe is about 20 years ahead of us, so they've had a lot of practice at building and utilizing ports for this. Surprisingly enough, they do not want to have, you don't want to have a paved surface. You want to use what's called dense graded aggregate, which is a soil aggregate, which is dirt basically, but it's bound together. So it's not paving in the traditional sense. From a distance, it may look like it's paved, but it is actually a granular surface. And that's done because there's so much activity when you put these heavy pieces of equipment on the ground, or when the track mounted cranes walk around the site. There's a potential that you can mar or scratch up the site surface. And if you have a paved surface, then you have to bring back, if it's concrete, you got to bring a concrete unit in to re-cement it. And if it's bituminous, you have to bring in a roller and redo that. And in Europe, they found that was too costly and too time consuming. And so they went to this soil mixture, dense graded aggregate mixture. It works great with the heavy equipment, but you can patch it by simply filling it in and tamping it down. And so that's the superficial feature. And then in terms of will there be any filling at the site, we don't intend to fill land, you probably, or maybe that question comes from having heard that in New Bedford, we had to fill some of the land underwater there. We don't need to do that. One of the beauties of this facility in Salem is that it's already an existing port facility, and it has essentially 2 docks. We will have to modernize one of the piers, and we'll have to repair the other one. But we do not anticipate filling a lot of the land underwater. The one area that we will have to fill is the cooling water. I guess it's the, I don't know if it's, I guess it's the export canal. We need that area in order to run our equipment from the northern part of the site to the southern part of the site. And that will be filled in, but that is really, that was a constructed channel to start with. And we will end up going through all of the permitting requirements that are required for dealing with that area. So there's very little marine environmental impact to the work that needs to be done to make this port a reality for offshore wind. And that's one of the reasons why we like it so much.
I'm going to jump to one of the lower questions just because I think it combines well with this, which is also, would there be any impact to anchorage for pleasure boats in Salem Harbor for the port modification?
Want me to take that one too, Bill?
Yeah.
So there should be very minimal anchorage modifications for this project. The facility at the power plant, the old power plant, was home or had frequent vessel visits from very, very large coal ships. The vessels that we're using, while we talk about them as gigantic, in reality, they're about the same size or smaller than those coal vessels were. So you will have about the same kind of impact on traffic in the harbor that occurred when the coal vessels used to come in. And now the cruise ships come in. And the other thing that's nice about Salem is that the facility is near the mouth of the harbor, and there is a direct federal navigational channel that goes to the facility. And so most of the large vessels will be tracking inside that navigational channel. So unless you have a recreational vessel that is too deep to operate outside of the federal navigational channel, then you should not have any more impact than you would with the Salem ferry coming in and out. There will be large vessels and there will be a fair amount of activity when we're building, but it's not like there's 10 or 12 vessels that come in every day. It's the vessel comes in, it picks up its components, it goes out to sea for a day or a couple of days, and then it comes back in. So it's not a constant utilization.
Great, thank you. Okay, just trying to look at new ones as I'm trying to make sure we cover old ones. Just a comment, I think this is something that always shocks everybody, but I guess perhaps you could just comment about it a little bit more. Just the fact that so these ships are going to be going all the way around Cape Cod back and forth, which just kind of I think once again signifies I guess how special this port must be. But just to make a comment, perhaps. Well, sure, and I mentioned. Sorry, this is Jay again, and I'll if you don't mind, Bill, I'll take this one too. And this is personal for me because I was one of the ones entrusted with the effort of trying to find a port that we could operate out of. And when we first suggested Salem, our logistics people said, "Oh, that's too far away." But then we started looking at the attributes of other ports that are closer. And we looked at Boston and Quincy and New Bedford and Fall River and Somerset. And the fact of the matter is they did not have the other attributes that we require in order to have a smooth operation. And so when it came down to it, which ports could really service what we were trying to do, it was, Staten Island and Salem. And so it may seem like Salem is a long way from where this is being, the wind farms are being set up, but it is actually one of the closest facilities with the right kinds of attributes that we need to make happen. And the next place we were looking at was on Staten Island, which is a fair distance away from from where we are today. So. Sure. There's a couple of questions, follow-up questions that came in about the surfacing of the area not being paved, but is the surfacing that you're just you're talking about permeable, or are there other environmental impacts that would be associated?
Yeah, without getting into too much nitty gritty, the surface that's been utilized, I will say that Bill and myself and a bunch of people from Massachusetts, that when offshore wind first became a possibility, took some trips to Europe to really study the ports and ask the port developers there, what their lessons learned were. And one of the things they said is, don't pave it with macadam, don't pave it with concrete, don't pave it with pavers. We went to some places where they had giant pavers that they had put in the ground. They said, first of all, you won't get any permeability out of it. And second of all, it'll get all messed up, and then you'll have a very time-consuming repair. So the beauty of the dense graded aggregate is it has a high, what we call load-bearing capacity, so it can handle these heavy components. It is easy to put down and easy to work with, and it's also semi-permeable, so it allows water to percolate. And we will have to design a stormwater and have a stormwater plan, just as we did in New Bedford when we built that site. So rest assured, the regulators will be brought into the mix, and we will be looking very closely at what infiltrates the subsurface and what kind of runoff there is. But all of the effective and necessary treatment and minimization technologies that exist for building these kind of facilities will be applied here at Salem.
Great, thank you. One more technical, and then I think we're going to ask some staffing and environmental justice questions, which is one of the questions was just simply where the blades are going to be manufactured, if you know, or where they might be coming from too.
Bill, how about you? You want to take that one?
Yeah, this is always a good question and a fair question. And I think what I always start with is just to give context. I mentioned that offshore wind has been moving forward in Europe for 30 years. And unfortunately, the United States only has 7 turbines installed. There's over 2,000 in Europe right now. So hence, there is not yet a supply chain in the United States, meaning there are not manufacturing facilities yet functioning. And of course, it's why did Willie Horton rob banks? Because that's where the money was. So right now, the industry is in Europe. However, as you all are reading, it is moving quickly to the United States. And I will tell you, we are this offshore industry, not only just Avangrid, but is locating that supply chain in the United States much faster than, for instance, in the UK, which is the largest offshore wind market in the world. They don't have the amount of commitments that the United States has. So right now, like on Vineyard Wind 1, a lot of those blades will be manufactured by GE in Europe, as well as potentially in Canada. So, and those components will come down into these sites for deployment out to the wind farms. I think though, what you're seeing though is Siemens Gamesa. We're not using them on our first project, but talking to them about our second and third. They are looking to locate a blade manufacturing facility down in Virginia, to manufacture blades. So big operation. I will tell you, GE is also looking to manufacture blades in the US, but hasn't pulled the trigger. So maybe that's the answer to that question.
You think GE will ever make them in Lynn? Sorry, we like to think regional here, right?
Well, I know. We are very proud, to have brought, the first manufacturing to Massachusetts in the announcement we made as part of this bid for cables to be manufactured down at Brayton Point. So that is a significant step forward. I don't know enough about the Lynn site, and Jay, I don't know if you've looked at it, but obviously I know GE is still up there, and whether there's been any analysis on that, as far as probably doesn't have the space.
Well, to that point, and I'll just interject here because I'm sure it's probably on the minds of a lot of the folks that are on the call. There are facilities in Lynn, and we also looked at Gloucester. I think many of you know that I was part of the study that Mass Clean Energy Center did about a year or so ago, looking for ports on the North Shore that could help service offshore wind. What floated to the top in that study was this footprint facility in Salem, but there are also several other facilities, including the GE Lynn site and NSTAR Lynn site, that could be utilized for manufacturing or other things. So we are trying to use the leverage that we have as a large developer that's building a bunch of wind farms to try to get our supply chain to do as much as they can in the US. In some cases, that may mean bringing components over and doing some finishing work, bolting them together here. And in other cases, it could be a manufacturing, like we were able to get the Prysmian Cable folks to do at Brayton Point. So we are working on it as diligently as we can. As you can imagine, these are very large investments and they require a solid pipeline. And that pipeline is just starting to be able to be visible here in the US. So the manufacturers are beginning to take interest, and we have a lot of hope that Prysmian will be followed by, and Siemens Gamesa will be followed by several others.
And to that point, we do have a specific question about Gloucester and whether there's some specific thoughts as to what might be able to be there. We like to try to have as much of a partnership with the Clean Energy Commission up there, and so we'd be curious.
Yeah, so having done that study for Mass CEC, I can say that Gloucester doesn't have the kind of acreage with large quaysides that, for instance, Salem has, but it does have a very strong maritime heritage and obviously a very strong fishing industry. And the research that we need to have done from a fishing perspective and from an environmental perspective requires vessels and specialized knowledge. And we fully expect that there will become opportunities, and that there may be some of our suppliers and some of the folks who do research and have to lay down do the ecological studies as part of our work may come out of Gloucester. So and one of the things I think we should mention is that we are not looking at this as Salem is by itself as a port. Salem is part of an integrated port infrastructure that we are developing, and we are working with the states and other developers and other suppliers to create a network, a real mesh of port facilities that work together. It doesn't make sense to build a manufacturing plant for every component in every community. And so we're going to end up having a sharing of resources across the ports, just like the container ports do today and the auto ports. This will become an integrated port, part of the integrated port infrastructure for both offshore wind and shipping in general here in Salem.
Great. So
Actually, if I could add, because I think that was
Yeah.
Candace Wheeler's question about Gloucester. If our fisheries liaison were on tonight, she would want me to mention that we have done some effort and outreach to the commercial fishing industry, commercial and recreational fishing industries, for folks who may be interested in participating in an offshore wind project, and have hired, like Jay mentioned, vessels and crew to operate fisheries research surveys, avian surveys, and also to act as scout or escort vessels on other operations. So we'll certainly be looking forward to hopefully more interest if there is some from the Gloucester area.
Great, thank you. So there's several questions here regarding, what the timeframe commitment is to Salem from Avangrid, and then kind of the potential for public-private partnership and commitments to EJ communities and EJ or diversity hires as well.
Yeah, let me try to hit some of those things. We are, I think step number one is really to kind of step number one really was both Avangrid Renewables and CIP making the long-term financial commitment and committing to operate the facility, lease the facility, over the next, period of time. We would start in 2025 and move toward the end of the decade, and then CIP would use the site to deploy their projects, and then future developers could utilize it to deploy theirs, or maybe we come back. So that I guess is step one, but to make that a reality, we need to probably execute, some support. When we talk about the private commitment, we are also looking for the public commitment. And so that's why we were so pleased to see the Speaker and the Senate President and the chairs of the Energy Committees up in Salem looking at this opportunity. So that is a big focus for, I know, the mayor's team and the local legislative leadership, but that's going to be kind of a big effort because we do need the support. We think it's very justified. We think we can explain, obviously, the economic benefit and the benefit to this region. And one of the things for Commonwealth Wind is spreading the benefits of this new industry across the Commonwealth. So it's, we love the South Coast, but this is an opportunity for the entire state to benefit from economically. So we make that point. McCall is one of my colleagues at the team, and I think when she heard the question about our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and the commitments we're making, I think she wanted to maybe jump on and hit that. So go ahead, McCall.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. So yes, I just wanted to say thank you for the question. So just to kind of paint the picture, this most recent solicitation from Massachusetts for offshore wind projects placed a lot of emphasis on incorporating diversity, equity, inclusion into the project planning and development. And we feel that our team has really gone above and beyond and thinking about how we can do that thoughtfully. So in our project bid, just at a high level, we included a comprehensive DE&I plan that includes the appointment of a chief diversity officer, as well as to make sure that we are bringing in the best practices, as well as committing $15 million in directly funded initiatives towards strengthening and diversifying both the regional workforce and regional supply chain for offshore wind. And some of those initiatives include training, business grants, scholarship funds, et cetera. And you'll be hearing more about those over time. And just, another key tenet is incorporating D&I into our procurement process. And so we've kind of thought about that in a few different ways as well. So definitely top of mind. Yeah, excited to be able to share more details about that in the coming months.
Thanks, McCall.
Great, super to hear. I'm just trying to look through because I don't want to go too much over our time here. But there is a question about, if there's any specific benefits to Salem residents. They're saying, I wonder how beneficial this is to Salem residents in terms of jobs, the city, lower or no cost electric for Salem residents, et cetera. Kind of what's in it for us, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, all of the above. So on somebody said, I think lower electricity, and some other people might say, well, no, that doesn't work. Electricity obviously spreads to the entire grid, and you pay it through your utilities. However, we're selling the electricity to the utilities, and the Department of Energy Resources said when Vineyard Wind 1, this was the first project that we would submit, they projected it would save ratepayers $1.4 billion over the 20-year life of the project. So yes, we will be saving you money on your rate pay, on your electric bills. Number two, jobs. So the reasons to make these types of investments is because the port is the anchor for the jobs in the region. Jay, I think, articulated it well. Will we basically have a requirement to say, I'm sorry, only Salem, you have to live in Salem, you can't work on the project? No, it will be, but I think it's fair to say that jobs will be attracted to the region, both direct jobs, both the construction of the facility as well as the operations during the deployment of wind farms. There was a question I saw in the clip about union jobs. Avangrid Renewables will sign a PLA, a project labor agreement, with organized labor and with the building trades. And we did that for Vineyard Wind 1. We pioneered that commitment, and hopefully we make a precedent. But we're also going to have the creation of many of the other specialty jobs that will be part of this industry. And so They will be kind of, Salem will become an anchor for those jobs. Are they all Salem residents? Probably not. Jay, anything to add to that?
Well, I think you just covered it really
All right.
well. Yeah, no, that's
All right,
exactly
all
right.
Keep going, Cindy.
Okay, just a few more, I think. One, I think I know the answer to this, but just are there any plans for development of an offshore wind farm close to Salem Harbor?
So this is an excellent question. I'm just supposed to be on another call right now, so hang on one second. I'm going to tell them to hang on. If you guys can just hang on a second, I'll be right there. The answer is yes. Right now, the states of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine are talking to each other. They've established a task force about offshore wind, inciting what we call an offshore wind area, let's say about 15 miles off the coast of let's say around the New Hampshire coast. So that could be an area where offshore wind could locate. We talked about floating. It's deeper water in the Gulf of Maine, so that is a different challenge. So we think after the deployment of the first series of projects in 2020, we think offshore wind in the Gulf of Maine is a huge opportunity in 2030 and into the 2030s. There is issues though. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Sorry, can you guys not hear me?
We can hear you, but I think maybe there were some other folks there.
Okay, and so what happened is I lost my train of thought, but basically there's no such thing as a free lunch when we come at energy siting. There are some concerns from commercial fishermen in the Gulf of Maine, but it's a pretty big ocean up there. And the question is, can we site offshore wind in a way that doesn't impact the fishery resource? We think the answer is yes, but that's not our decision. That's probably a stakeholder partnership discussion, that will be led by the federal government as well as the states, with lots of input from community members. But again, if anybody hasn't seen the movie Don't Look Up with Leonardo DiCaprio, make sure you watch it, because we got to get out of our own way as a human race if we are going to address climate change and survive as a species. How about that?
Great. Okay. I know that this is often a question, which is, will the components arrive at Salem port via water or roads?
It will. The components are primarily going to arrive via water, and that's really the whole point of being on the water. These components are so darn large that they really cannot travel on roads, unless, of course, you're in Denmark and they basically redesigned the country in order to transport. They used to. Me and Jay have driven the roads. They've got rotaries, and they basically just put a hole through the rotary so they can drive the blades through or then the cells through. In the United States, though, with the congestion and the tightness of our old communities and our unique cow pass, shall we say, we're going to be needing these ports in order to kind of have the components both be built on ports, but also to arrive into ports like marshaling ports like Salem, so that they can be utilized, they can be constructed, and they can be deployed out on vessels and installed into the ocean. Most likely in the early years, south of Martha's Vineyard, our projects are about 15 miles off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. But in the later years, in 2030, we would anticipate in the Gulf of Maine.
Great. And then I think the last, we have one question about just, will the project impact the Blaney Street docks or the ferry itself? I know you mentioned that,
Yeah.
It's a similar channel.
Jay.
Yeah, so we're working very hard in our conceptual designs to make sure that we don't impact things like the Salem Ferry and some of the critical private and public infrastructure that exists in the harbor. We're very well aware that Salem is a beloved area. Its harbor is extremely held dear by so many in the community. There's thousands of boats there. There's people who use the ferry to commute to Boston every day. And we are going to work as hard as we can to avoid any impact to those things. At present, we don't anticipate extending into the Blaney Street area. We are looking at, when we're actually doing vessel traffic studies, and we will as part of our engineering, to look at if we have a certain kind of vessel that we're expecting to come in there, will it impact the Salem Ferry or other vessels that want to come into the Blaney Street area in any way, shape, or form. And we may have to come up with a traffic study, but we'll work with the harbor authorities and the people who run the ferry to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we come up with a practical use for everybody of the harbor, so that we don't want anybody running into us, and we also don't want to create undue inconvenience.
And then there's also a question at the end here about if we know how the ships themselves will be powered, if they be LNG or if we know.
It's a good question, because there's a lot of folks in the industry that are looking to do electric power vessels. There's talk of hydrogen powered vessels. We as a company, Avangrid Renewables, have a sustainability goal that we want to be sustainable throughout, that we're going to transition towards 2030 as a zero sustainable company. And so that is underway, and we are engaging with many of those kind of third parties who are trying to drive that technology, and we're trying to look favorably in order to kind of maybe ignite and give opportunities to those companies that are doing the Lord's work.
And just to add to what Bill just said, that we are dedicated to technologies that reduce carbon emissions and the global warming gases. We will be putting plug-in stations for when the vessels come in. It's called cold ironing. When a vessel comes in, and instead of running its engines or generators at the quayside to keep its lights on and the heaters on for its workers, it will plug in and be able to turn those generators off. It will not be producing any effluent or smoke or vapors that could be harmful during that period. That's something that ports up and down all over the world are transitioning to, and we'll be looking to put in the most modern, most environmentally friendly components to the port as possible.
Super. Well, that's great to hear. I think we've got most questions. I'm going to go ahead and share our closeout slide here. So it sounds like, certainly great adventures to come. It certainly sounds like we've got some wonderful potential to use this port for quite a while for offshore wind. And I think one of the last questions was kind of like, what it seems to me we heard a lot of years there, but kind of what would happen after we install the ones that we think we're going to install, or the ones that are upcoming. Do you have any idea kind of what the port might look like after that big effort is done, or what might come after that, I guess?
Yeah, maybe I can try to take a quick shot at that. I mean, first of all, when you think about what's going to happen, next year, it's awfully hard to kind of predict with who would have predicted COVID, right? But I think we're basically giving the town of the city of Salem some strong certainty that over the next 10 years, you're going to see this port utilized in a very busy way, a good way, I think, for a lot of jobs and the deploying the clean energy future that this country needs and this planet needs. So I think the second 10 years is really probably about floating offshore wind. It is a technology that is kind of moving towards commercial scale, but it's still kind of maybe in the demonstration scale. So I can't speak with 100% certainty on that, but I will tell you that everything that I've seen, everyone believes that floating is the next frontier, because it is necessary for us to meet our climate goals, and it's not just necessary here in the U.S., but it's necessary around the world. So, but I would also say finally that every port, I think, is always an asset. It's always multi-purposed. It obviously can adapt to the things that we haven't even thought about, come 2040. And so, Jay, I don't know if you have any closing remarks on that one, but you're kind of a deeper thinker than I am.
Well, I don't know about that, Bill, but the bottom line is what I think we tend to not talk about it too much, but these wind farms that we develop, they
Oh,
run for
O&M.
about 25 years. There's
Yeah.
O&M, there's operations for 25 years that will be going on. And then, these things cost a couple $2 billion to build. So we don't want to throw them out when we're done. So we'll be repowering them. We think the industry will repower these things after 25 years. There'll be a whole industry that'll be built up around bringing in the newest components, the newest and latest turbines that get developed in 20 years and putting those out in replacing the turbines that are there. So we're pretty sure that that this port will be utilized in a large way for a lot of clean energy uses for a long time to come. And as Bill said, if the clean energy future ends up being totally realized in an earlier timeframe than we think, then there's all kinds of other uses for this port, and we think it's going to be a great asset to the northern Massachusetts and northern New England.
Great. Well, I want to thank all of our speakers tonight. Remind folks that, we want to have you follow us. This is going to be a recorded event, so we will be posting this again up on our Salem Safe YouTube channel, so it'll be available to view. If you have any additional questions that come up after the fact or we didn't get a chance to answer, please feel free to email us at Salem Safe, or Rose DaCosta also put her email in the chat, so you can certainly email her as well directly. And we'd like to ask you to just stay involved. We have a specific wind group, so if you want to email us at salemsafe@gmail.com, we'll add you to that group and you'll get some additional information. And we'll be having our next meeting on March 3rd, and that will be discussing environmental justice issues. So we really thank all of our participants, all of our speakers, and look forward to seeing folks next month as well. Thank you so much.
Great. Good night, everyone.
Good
Salem.
night.
Thanks, everybody.